The top 10 safest places in Florida. This video is analytical, so it's very straightforward. My top 10 list will concord with other top 10 lists that you'll see on the internet if the writers of those articles did their job properly. However, there are a few misleading lists on the internet. That is because top 10 lists are nothing more than commercials for developers or boards of tourism who want to make their areas look attractive, and thus they use top 10 lists as a way to put out misleading information that attracts people to their communities. However, from an analytical standpoint, safety in Florida is pretty straightforward. The southern region of the state is the safest, and the islands that are more inaccessible due to bridges or other geographical barriers tend to be the safest places because criminals have less access to these areas. These are areas that are strategically located on islands, have limited access, and thus real estate values tend to be extraordinarily high. So if you don't have a lot of money to afford living in these exclusive areas, chances are you're realistically not going to be able to afford living in the safest areas of the state. And much of the misinformation that you will find online on this topic is to mislead people who have a mediocre budget to believe that they can somehow afford to live in a very safe place in Florida. Safety is a very desired quality of living, and people will pay all types of money to feel like they're secure. So it's only logical to assume that the southern part of the state, with its more expensive real estate, will hold all of the most exclusive, desirable, and safest areas. For example, in Collier County, which is where Naples, Florida sits, the murder rate for Hispanics and blacks is lower than the state and the national average. These types of safety analytics are completely conclusive in that even demographical groups that are most likely to be in danger in other places are safer than anywhere else in the country here. Let's start with our list of the safest places in Florida. Number 1 is Boca Grande, an exclusive island. You have to cross a toll and have your vehicle photographed before entering the island. It is located in Lee County, Florida, which does not have great criminal analytics. However, to access Boca Grande, you have to go through Charlotte County, which has one of the lowest murder rates in the entire state. A county where the murder rates and the overdose rates for Hispanics and blacks are not higher than for whites. A lot of people are confused with the definition of safety. Safety means that everyone is safe regardless of their demographical background. Many communities have great safety analytics for some people while they marginalize others. Number 2 is Marco Island, located in Collier County, one of the safest counties in the entire state. The island has a lot of snowbirds, and recently it's had a lot of vacation rentals, which means it's not the sleepy little island it used to be. But because of its geographical location at the end of Florida, near the Everglades, it's a great place to live if you enjoy nature, safety, calmness, and tranquility. And the island has also proven very resilient with direct landfalls from hurricane like Irma. For nature lovers looking for an incredible retirement, it continues to be one of the safest places in Florida, where many people even joke that the biggest source of crime on the island is the actual police force because they're not occupied. Collier County also has one of the lowest drug overdose death rates in the entire state of Florida. Number 3 is Naples, Florida, the actual city limits of Naples, Florida, not just anybody who has a Naples address. Hurricane Ian destroyed the city's iconic pier, and the city has not gone about rebuilding it. Many people suspect that the reason they don't want to rebuild the Naples Pier is to keep tourists away from the city. This beautiful city attracts a lot of tourists, but the locals who live here and pay millions of dollars for their properties would like a little peace and tranquility, which has been difficult to find since the city has become a popular tourist destination. Known for its fishing, its nature along the coast, and at the doorsteps of the Florida Everglades, it's no wonder that so many people with money want to have their winter homes here. With many famous people living in the city, every expense possible for safety is taking place. Number 4, Sanibel Island. This coastal island can only be reached by a causeway which has a toll, which means that anyone entering or exiting the island can easily be monitored. This is a type of exclusive access that prevents people from wandering into areas they're not supposed to. Other than a few tourist destinations, the island is for the most part vacant of things to do and is nothing more than a secluded hideout for people with a lot of money, particularly during the wintertime. Again, it is located in Lee County, Florida. The island of Sanibel is excluded from the violence that prevails on the mainland. A fairly inaccessible island makes it attractive for people who want that seclusion. The island's also known for having some of the best shelling in the entire world, and that does attract a lot of tourists. Their iconic lighthouse was also damaged during Hurricane Ian. Number 5 is Longboat Key, located between Bradenton Beach, Anna Maria Island, and Sarasota. To get onto this island, you can either go through one island in Sarasota or another island in Manatee County. With a few exceptions, most of the restaurants and things to do are on the adjacent islands, which means that Longboat Key is predominantly just a residential area. Allowing few options for the public, most of the island is in private hands, and only the residents or special guests here will be able to enjoy the island's beaches, making it one of the safest places since only very wealthy people can afford to obtain the real estate, and there are very few people from the outside residing on this very private and expensive island. The county of Sarasota and Manatee, which the island sits on, are fairly safe places with low murder rates. However, because of its mostly residential nature and the fact you have to go through 2 islands to get there, with less tourists to cause havoc, Longboat Key is considerably safer than Anna Maria Island and Siesta Key or other coastal islands in this region. Number 6 is Villano Beach, located in the coast of St. Augustine, Florida. St. Johns County is one of the safest counties in Florida with some of the highest incomes, and this particular area along the coast of St. Augustine seems to be one of the most exclusive places to live in the entire state. The coastline is beautiful, full of nature, peace, and tranquility. St. Johns County is known for its safety. With a murder rate of less than 4 per 100,000, it makes it one of the safest places in the entire state of Florida. Being next to St. Augustine, the oldest city in America, there is so much nature and history to soak in this part of Florida. It's this history that attracts a lot of people to this area who enjoy the area's deep historical culture and influence in the state of Florida, as the area is renowned for its historical importance. Number 7 is Miami Springs, a bunker in the center of Dade County, Florida. To the south, the Miami airport. Canals, bridges, roads make this part of Miami a miniature fortress in the center of the metropolitan area. With a very low population density, a small community where law enforcement knows all the residents, and anyone entering the community who isn't a resident can easily expect an encounter with law enforcement, as the community is heavily patrolled and no nonsense when it comes to crime and outsiders. You'll find beautiful historic homes, and while the neighborhood has a very modest feel, the real estate values are strong. The adjacent communities of Doral and Hialeah have some of the lowest murder rates of any city, not just in the state of Florida, but in the entire country. Miami Springs is a small town surrounded by a large city. Number 8 is Lakewood Ranch, Florida. a suburban area in Manatee County, which is a suburb to Sarasota and Bradenton. Both Manatee and Sarasota County have murder rates below the state average. And with Lakewood Ranch being the newest suburban part of the county, you can expect it's going to be a fairly safe area. Famous people like Mick Jagger have had homes in Lakewood Ranch, as well as many athletes, musicians, and CEOs of companies. The area is also home to many famous YouTubers. There's no shortage of Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and other exotic cars on the streets here. Within less than an hour to Tampa, 35 minutes to St. Pete, right outside of Bradenton and Sarasota, there's a lot of opportunities for people who choose Lakewood Ranch. There's a growing Asian and South American community here. If safety is a priority to you, you'll be hard-pressed to find a place safer than Lakewood Ranch in Florida. Number 9 is Coral Gables, right outside of Miami, Florida. Other online lists are also going to include Coral Gables as one of the safest places in Florida. I remember one evening we were in Coral Gables and it was already late at night. There was people partying and drinking, dancing salsa music late into the night. And I noticed that somebody left the keys to a very expensive luxury vehicle on a table around hundreds of people while they dance salsa music. You can't get away with doing that everywhere. Coral Gables really is one of the safest places in Florida. The real estate values here are going to reflect that. Many of the locals are saying, though, that the people moving into the city from New York have actually driven up the crime rates. Miami-Dade County has the lowest drug overdose rate in the entire state of Florida. And many people fear that Miami-Dade's drug overdose rate is going to climb if people from the Northeast start to bring their problems to this quiet city. There is one county in the Florida Panhandle that had a lower rate, but with a very small population, it's almost insignificant. And while South Florida is the state's safest area, it is starting to have an increase of crime, and many of the locals fear that the safety of South Florida is really in peril these days, as the people moving in simply are more inclined to do drugs and resort to violence. And not only is the Miami area increasing its crime in the future, but it's also losing its Hispanic heritage. Miami has been reducing its crime rate steadily now for many years, but many people are afraid that soon that's coming to an end. Crime analytics for 2023 are not out yet, but I have family on the east coast of Florida in Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade, and they are telling me that things have definitely changed for the worst in southeast Florida. Meanwhile, some counties adjacent to Jacksonville are starting to see a lot of improvement. Murder rates for African Americans in Dade County are disturbingly high. Number 10 is Weston, a suburb that is halfway between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. Has a large Colombian and Venezuelan community. This beautiful new suburban area, which is very wealthy, has a great location, allowing the residents access to two very important cities. If you enjoy diversity in cuisine, living here will be an absolute treat. The area has an impressive collection of South American restaurants. For its low crime and murder rates, most online lists are going to include Weston, and I can definitely agree. And being on the outskirts of the metropolitan area, you have easy access to interstates in case you need to evacuate. So if you're looking for a safe suburb in the Fort Lauderdale or Miami area infused with Latin culture, this may be the place for you. Definitely one of the safest places in Florida. Alright guys, those are the top 10 safest places that you can live in Florida. South Florida continues to dominate the list, including everything from warm weather in the winter to a lot of safety. It will continue to be the place to go for the wealthy looking to escape the cold in the winter months. Southwest Florida and its coastal communities continue to dominate safety. Unfortunately, the influx of people to Southwest and Southeast Florida from other places could soon mean that there are going to be increases in crime rates in South Florida. Some of the suburbs of Jacksonville have shown a huge improvement. However, we noticed that in Putnam County, right outside of Jacksonville, the murder rate for Hispanics is about 4 times the state average. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And just like Miami is hostile towards African Americans analytically, the rural counties surrounding Jacksonville that are starting to grow and become attractive to a lot of people are still a hostile place for Hispanics. The Hispanic suburbs of Miami continue to be some of the safest places in the entire state. And even places like Hialeah, which are not exactly known as a prominent place, continues to have some of the lowest murder rates in the entire state of Florida. Hispanics really are contributing in South Florida to some of the safest communities. Sadly, Central Florida is starting to see an increase in crime. With the exception of some Orlando suburbs like Lake Nona, it seems like rural Central Florida and North Florida and the Panhandle, the crime rates are too high to ever make it on these safety lists. Because of constant hurricane evacuations and the potential for smuggling both of humans and of other substances, the Florida Keys, while beautiful, safe, and very secluded, are not going to have any entries on my list for 2023.